friends, how are you? I hope you are doing okay, and it's been such a long time since we have seen each other because I have shared in my last video, I have been home. I haven't gone home for 3 years because of like the pandemic, so it almost feels so surreal that I am here, and I just needed a minute to let it all soak in before I start on my other duties. And in the past 2 weeks that I haven't pushed out videos, the support that you guys have given me so far is just mind-blowing. I know that I'm such a small channel and everything, it's just small wins, but the fact that my first video on this channel got 1,000 views in 2 months just blow my mind, that there are like 1,000 Hermione supporters out there supporting my video. And so I thank you guys for all the patience and all the support. And so we are back with another Hermione fanfiction recommendations, and today is one of the videos that I have been wanting to do for so long, and it is Voldemort's Win Alternative Universe story.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places.
To be honest, I didn't read that many Voldemort's Win AU story, just because the more I progress with Hermione, the more I read, the more emotionally attached I feel to Draco and Hermione. And so wartime story is always very taxing and tolling on me. I always feel very anxious and curious to find out what happened next, if they get hurt or not. So I usually tend to stay away from wartime story, but lately I had a chance to read 2 very great Hermione story that are Voldemort's Win AU, and so I finally decided that it's time for me to push out this video because I have finally have enough recommendations that I feel good about to give you guys a video. And so let us get started. And of course, I cannot start out this video without mentioning the king and queen of the Voldemort's Win AU story, The Greatest of the Great, Manacle by Sandlin Yu. I feel like whether or not you are a Hermione fan, you have already heard about Manacle before, but if you haven't, it is a story where Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix has already lost the final battle at Hogwarts, and now Voldemort is ruling the Wizarding War. Hermione is a prisoner of war and a slave. She possessed a memory that were deemed very beneficial to the Dark Lord, and so she was given to this very high-profile editor who is illegitimate. He is called the High Reef, and that is how the story opens up for us. Before I start on with any opinions on this story, I want to say once again that this story has very heavy trigger warning that you cannot ignore. These are kind of like the spine and the foundation of the story, and so please inform yourself before you dive into this work. Even though I know that the majority of the fan, including myself, has put this on their Hermione fanfiction must-read list, I know that this story is not for everyone just because of how heavy and how dark it is. So if you find yourself not enjoying Manacle, please go ahead and skip over this part and see if the other recommendations that I'm going to mention today would fit your taste more. But in my opinion, I feel like Manacle is just the greatest of all time when it comes to Hermione. It is so well read, so well recommended, well loved by so many people, and not without any reasons. I feel like the world building, the characterization, the writing, how the event plays out in this story is just very engaging. It keeps you on your toe and it keeps you reading. It is one of those stories that when you pick up, you will not be able to drop it down. To this day, even though Manacle is not my comfort read, nor it is my all-time favorite Hermione story, I still think that it is the pilot and it is the king and queen of Hermione work. And if you have the stomach for this story, definitely go ahead and check it out, not only for Voldemort's Win AU story, but for Hermione fanfiction as a whole. And I have already said this in my first video ever on YouTube, but the only 2 problems I have with Manacle is first is the pacing of some of the flashback chapters, just because it is such a plot-driven story that I am super impatient and curious to find out what's next. So I feel like it was a little bit draggy at some point. And the second point is the characterization of Hermione. If you have read the story, you will know what I mean. The fact that she did not choose him until the very end, when it did not matter anymore, just bothered me until this day. And sometimes when I think back about this story, I think about how much suffering Draco has to go through in the 2 years that Hermione was missing, and it just wrecked my heart. And I think to this day, the High Reef Draco of Manacle remains in my favorite Dracos of all time, and it is just a perfect story. So if you have the stomach for this story, please go ahead and check it out. I don't think you will regret the decision to read Manacle. Next, in order to stay within our novel length categorization, I'm going to recommend a couple of more longer pieces of work. The first one being Draconian by Noelle. Story is the newest Hermione story that I have added into my collection, and I read this entire thing on my 30-hour trip home. I read it from the moment that I stepped into the airport waiting for my first flight to just before I landed in Saigon. So it is another piece of work that will forever have a special place in my heart for bringing me home. I'm just just sentimental like that, guys. Sorry. Story is set 3 years after the final battle at Hogwarts, and this also portrayed the aftermath of the loss at the final battle of Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix. But he is not dead. He's still alive and was forced into hiding with the rest of the Order members. Draco has to kill his way through the Death Eater rank in order to save himself after his mother betrayal to the Dark Lord at the final battle. He was offered a chance for redemption by his aunt Andromeda. Find Hermione Granger, locating her, the only person who was believed to be the missing key to the second chance of the Order of Phoenix. She is the only one person who can revive the Order and give the war another go. But when Draco find her 3 years after the final battle, she was no one like she was before. She was bruised, she was battered, and she has no memory of Harry Potter or the Order. She only remembers him and has no wish to return into the battlefield. So he is faced with another dilemma. Will he ship her back to the Order and rid himself of another problem, or will he keep her safe in a world ruled by draconian law, his own law? In my opinion, in my book, I want to call this story a classic fanfiction just because it possesses all of these elements that I would personally expect from a very good fanfiction. I really like the characterization of everyone in this story, not only Draco and Hermione but the supporting cast, especially Theo. This is one of the stories that have an ensemble of cast from canon, and so I feel like the author did a very good job portraying those characters and giving them a color of their own instead of just putting a character in there for a sake of having a character. And I also feel like I'm a part of their friend group, and so when the story concluded, I almost felt like I am breaking up with some of my friends, especially the lovebirds. Apart from the characterization, I find myself also enjoying the details and the pacing of the story, and it is one of the stories that give me hangover after I finish reading it. I knew going in that this story has won the best fanfiction award in 2016, and so I expected greatness and I wasn't let down by the author. It is one of those stories where it wasn't extreme by any mean, but it is just so good. Like, it is one of those stories that I think I would remember for a very long time. Next is also another story that I have just read recently, just right before Draconian, and that is A Season for Setting Fire by My Be Writing. This story premise is, I promise you, one of the most unique in all of the Dramione story that I have read. In this story, a soulmate bond appeared when Hermione was being tortured by Bellatrix at the manor, and so now Draco is forced into following the trio out of the manor. After they left the manor, they also went to Shell Cottage, just like canon, and every event of the canons kind of play out, but without Harry Potter surviving. And so now Draco and Hermione has to fight a war together if they wanted to continue their life and figuring out what is happening between the two of them. I ignore all of the author's warning going into it, reading it, without realizing how graphic and how violent this story is. This is no child play wartime story. This is real life wartime story. So if this is not something that you enjoy, I recommend skipping over to the next part. This is one of those stories where I didn't expect to love, but I ended up falling in love so hard, and I came back rereading many parts of the story many times. And like I have said before in one of my previous videos, My Be Writing is very good at writing different point of view for different characters without making the story feel choppy or repeated. So I would recommend you to read this story just because of how unique the character building, the world building, the premise, the writing, even the format is. And I think that if you have the stomach for this story, just like Manacle, it is a great voldemort win story. It portrays such a unique development and relationship characterization between Draco and Hermione that I cannot. And I hope that you have a good time reading it too, but please do not ignore the warning like I did. And the last novel-length story of today's video is going to be The Shadow Dragon by Grace Diamond Fear. And I just realized that this author wrote one of the fluffiest stories that I have read, and now The Shadow Dragon is just on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so please give a round of applause for fanfiction author who I love, who are angels to this earth, giving us their effort, their work for free, and letting us enjoying their wide range of talent. And so, The Shadow Dragon is also a voldemort win AU story in which Hermione is working for Lucius Malfoy. She embezzled some of his money and was now thrown into prison. And Draco's own a brothel called The Shadow Dragon, and he offers her a chance out of prison by working for him. and so that is how their story begins. And I want to say that this is among the greatest world building story out there. The concept of the brothel, the pianis, the star, the girls, everything was just so well developed. I finished this story and didn't find myself really enjoying it toward the end because I feel like some of the details in here is just a little bit too unrealistic or too unnatural. But I know that this is among favorites for some of you guys. This story is for when you want to satisfy your steamy radar. This is P with plot, so you will be satisfied with the characterization and the world building and the development between Draco and Hermione, how they interact, how they fall in love with each other with the P. So if that is your cup of tea, I think that you should go ahead and give this a go. Please let me know how you feel about the Shadow Dragon and any other story that I have shared so far. I would love to hear you guys' opinion. And the next category is novella, and I cannot do a Voldemort win AU video without mentioning Uncoffin by Lady of Clue. I like this story because the focus of the plotline is not on the war itself, but kind of on the war where Voldemort is ruling. There's no active battle or anything like that, but it portrays a very bleak reality when Voldemort is in power. In this story, Hermione is staying with the remainder of the Weasley family, but everyone has to alter their appearance in order to stay in like a concentration camp or a designated area for half-bloods, and it is very hard for non-purebloods to obtain a job or the papers, and so everyone is surviving in the best way that they could. There are not enough food, so a lot of young girls turn themselves into sex worker in order to survive, and just by chances Hermione and Draco ran into each other, but of course Draco doesn't know that she was Hermione because of how her appearance has been altered. I want to say that this is a classic Dramione fanfiction, not just Voldemort win AU. Not to mention that I think the concept of the High Reef is what's introduced in this story, but do not quote me on that. The storyline is superb, it is god tier, and the interaction between Draco and Hermione is very selective. It is limited, but you can see how genuinely they care and love each other, and the connection between them is just so strong that I can almost feel like they are tangible. The characterization of Draco in here is just, he's a very conflicted character, and on the other hand we have a Hermione who is very observant, and so I think that is the perfect combination when it comes to Hermione's story. So if you have enjoyed Manacle, I think that you will have a very good time with Uncoffin. And this is one of the stories that when I read it, I almost feel like my heart is cracking into pieces. And so that is all that you need to hear from me when it comes to Uncoffin by Lady of Clue. And if you want to ignore all of my other recommendations on this list, please go ahead and read this story. And the next novella we have From the Ashes by Damn Scribbling Woman. And in this story we have a wartime Voldemort win AU story where there are active combat going on between the parties, and Hermione was captured by no other than Draco. But when she was captured, she was in his care. Sometimes she sees this Death Eater Draco forcing information out of her, but sometimes she sees this very genuine, very soft lover caring for her in some distant memory that she cannot access anymore. I know I have already said it in one of my videos before that I always feel more connected to Draco, so I may be a little bit biased when I read the characterization. I may pay more attention to Draco, but the Draco in here, he just breaks my heart for how much suffering that he has to pass through. He kind of gives me the same vibe with Manacle Draco, where he is the one who remembers, and he has to go through with everything that he has to go through every day, being a Death Eater, trying to protect his identity, trying to protect her. And while she doesn't even remember one thing that happened between them, she doesn't remember him as anything other than a Death Eater, an enemy, the one who hurt her. And those stories just punch a hole in my gut, and I kind of always wanted to kind of torture myself with that kind of angst, and the author in this story did it so well that I once again feel like my heart is cracking up into pieces when reading this story. When I finish this story, I just wish that there is one more chapter just to see if my boy is finally happy again, but I know that the story ends perfectly just like everything else in this story, and so please go ahead and read it. And in order to conclude the novella category and also the video, we have Letter List and The Strangest Twist by Gansey. So in this story we also have a very unique premise. In this story, Harry fell during the final battle, and Hermione was found and kept safe by Draco in his cabin in the Forbidden Forest. Hermione, being Hermione, she wanted to keep fighting this war, keep fighting Voldemort, but as time goes on and as more information came to her, she found out that the Order of Phoenix has kept many secrets from her, and she soon came to the realization that the only one that she can trust during this war may be her savior from the very beginning, Draco. Draco Malfoy, and so they has to navigate, or she has to navigate through that barrier in order to work together and win the war maybe. And so I have already gone ahead and recommended you another one of my suffering Draco story. I think that I'm maybe biased with those stories because I'm just into that kind of angst, but in this story it was very obvious to the reader from the very beginning why Draco was doing what he was doing, why he needed to keep her safe, but it wasn't obvious enough to her. And it is one of those stories once again that I really wanted another chapter just to see how things play out between them. But I know that the ending is perfect for the story, and I do love every single minute of reading this story. And that concludes my Voldemort Win AU recommendations. I know that some of the stories in here are just teensy wartime story because I'm just chicken like that, but on the other hand we have some very heavy and dark pieces of work, so please go ahead and inform yourself with a trigger warning before you dive into any of the recommendations that I've presented today. And I hope that you guys are still doing well wherever you are on earth, and I hope that you have a great summer day out reading Hermione, and I will see you guys in my next